Imagine standing in the heart of St. Peter's Square as the sun sets behind the majestic dome. The colossal colonnade designed by Bernini, with its 284 towering columns arranged in 4 rows, seems to wrap around you like the protective arms of a giant. In front of you rises the largest church the world has ever seen, crowned by Michelangelo's breathtaking dome that still dominates the Roman skyline after 5 centuries. To your right stands a 25-meter-tall ancient Egyptian obelisk that once witnessed the horrific persecution of early Christians burned alive as human torches in Nero's Circus. This entire sovereign nation measures only 0.44 square kilometers, smaller than many shopping malls or single farms. Yet for 2,000 years, it has crowned emperors, excommunicated kings, inspired the greatest artists in human history, survived the rise and fall of empires, endured bloody scandals, and continues to spiritually guide more than 1.4 billion Catholics across the planet today. This is the complete, uncensored, and often unbelievable true story of the Vatican, a saga so filled with blood, faith, power, genius, corruption, redemption, war, art, and mystery that it feels like the plot of the greatest thriller novel ever written, except every single detail is real. It all began in the most unlikely place, a marshy, disease-ridden, malaria-infested hill on the wrong side of the Tiber River that the ancient Romans called Ager Vaticanus. They considered it cursed land, far from the grandeur of the 7 hills of Rome, and used it mainly for chariot races, burials, and executions. In the year 64 AD, Rome was burning. A devastating fire raged for 9 days, destroying large parts of the city. Emperor Nero, widely suspected of starting the blaze himself to make way for his extravagant new palace, desperately needed someone to blame. He turned his fury on the small but growing Christian community. Mass arrests and horrific public executions followed. According to ancient Christian tradition, preserved by writers like Tertullian, Origen, and Eusebius, the apostle Simon Peter, the rough Galilean fisherman whom Jesus personally chose and renamed Rock, declaring, "Upon this rock I will build my church," was arrested and brought to Nero's Circus on Vatican Hill. Feeling unworthy to die in the same manner as his Lord, Peter requested to be crucified upside down. His wish was granted. After his death, his body was secretly buried in a simple grave in a nearby pagan necropolis on the slope of the hill. Not far away, the Apostle Paul was beheaded on the Via Ostiensis. These 2 martyrdoms planted the seed that would eventually grow into the most influential religious institution in history. For nearly 3 centuries, Christians lived under the constant threat of persecution under emperors like Decius, Valerian, and Diocletian. Then, in 312 AD, everything changed dramatically. Before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Emperor Constantine the Great reportedly saw a vision of the Chi-Rho symbol in the sky, with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He won the battle, became sole ruler of the Roman Empire, and in 313 AD issued the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity and ended the official persecutions. Between 318 and 322 AD, Constantine ordered the construction of a monumental basilica directly over the tomb of St. Peter. The old St. Peter's Basilica was an engineering marvel for its time, nearly 110 meters long, with 5 naves, a large transept, and an atrium capable of holding thousands of pilgrims. The massive red granite obelisk from Egypt, originally brought by Caligula and placed in Nero's Circus, was moved there at enormous cost and effort. That same obelisk still stands today in the center of St. Peter's Square, a silent witness to almost 2,000 years of history. For centuries afterward, the popes did not live permanently at the Vatican. Their official residence remained the Lateran Palace. However, the site over Peter's grave grew in unmatched symbolic importance. As the Western Roman Empire collapsed under waves of barbarian invasions, Visigoths in 410, Vandals in 455, and later the Lombards, the popes gradually stepped into the power vacuum. In the mid-8th century, when the Lombards threatened to conquer Rome, Pope Stephen II appealed to the Franks for help. In 754 to 756, Pepin the Short, king of the Franks, defeated the Lombards and formally donated large territories in central Italy to the Pope in what became known as the Donation of Pepin. This single act created the Papal States, a real earthly kingdom ruled directly by the popes, that would last for more than 1100 years. In the year 800, on Christmas Day, Pope Leo III dramatically crowned Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor inside the old St. Peter's Basilica, forging a powerful alliance between church and empire that defined medieval Europe for centuries. Power, however, always brings danger and temptation. The 10th century witnessed one of the darkest periods in papal history, known as the Saeculum Obscurum, or pornocracy. Powerful Roman noble families, especially the Theophylacti, essentially controlled papal elections like a mafia. Some popes were accused of shocking immorality, simony, and turning the Lateran Palace into a place of debauchery. Yet reform movements slowly emerged. The Cluniac Reform, and especially the Gregorian Reform, led by Pope Gregory VII in the 11th century, fought fiercely against corruption, clerical marriage, and the practice of lay investiture. The famous Walk to Canossa in 1077, where Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV stood barefoot in the snow for 3 days, begging papal forgiveness, became one of the most legendary moments of the Middle Ages. The papacy reached the absolute peak of its temporal and spiritual power in the early 13th century under Pope Innocent III. He excommunicated kings at will, called crusades, mediated international disputes, and declared himself the Vicar of Christ with authority over both souls and kingdoms. The papal states were at their largest extent, and the Church stood as the most dominant institution in Europe. But cracks were already forming. In 1309, under heavy French pressure, the papacy was forced to move to Avignon in southern France. This period, known as the Babylonian captivity, lasted 68 years, with 7 French popes living under the influence of the French crown. When the papacy finally returned to Rome in 1377, chaos erupted into the Great Western Schism, with 2 and sometimes 3 rival popes claiming legitimacy simultaneously. The Council of Constance finally resolved the crisis in 1417, but Rome was left impoverished, and the ancient Constantinian Basilica was literally falling apart. A new golden age was about to begin. The 15th and 16th centuries transformed the Vatican into the glittering artistic and cultural capital of the world during the Renaissance. Popes became the greatest patrons of art in history. Pope Nicholas V began ambitious rebuilding projects. Then came the fiery Pope Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope. He personally led armies wearing armor, and in 1506 made the radical decision to demolish the 1,200-year-old basilica built by Constantine and construct a new one that would surpass anything ever built. Donato Bramante designed the original ambitious plan. Raphael decorated the papal apartments with immortal frescoes such as the School of Athens. Michelangelo, already in his 70s and reluctant at first, was convinced to design the massive dome, an engineering triumph inspired by the Pantheon, but even grander, and to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling between 1508 and 1512 while lying on scaffolding with paint dripping into his eyes. He created masterpieces like the creation of Adam, where God's finger almost touches that of man. Years later, he returned to paint the overwhelming Last Judgment on the altar wall. Bernini would later complete the spectacular colonnade embracing the square, design the towering bronze baldacchino over Peter's tomb using bronze taken from the Pantheon, and fill the Vatican with countless Baroque masterpieces. This explosion of beauty came at a tremendous cost. The lavish spending and aggressive sale of indulgences to finance the projects fueled widespread anger. In 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of a church in Wittenberg, igniting the Protestant Reformation and permanently splitting Western Christianity. In 1527, the brutal sack of Rome by unpaid troops of Emperor Charles V brought death, rape, and destruction on a horrifying scale. The Church responded with the Counter-Reformation, the Council of Trent, from 1545 to 1563, the founding of the Jesuit order by Ignatius of Loyola, and the Roman Inquisition. The 17th and 18th centuries brought continued artistic splendor in the Baroque era, but a steady decline in political power as strong nation-states rose across Europe. The Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and Napoleon delivered devastating blows. Pope Pius VI died in French exile in 1799. Pius VII was imprisoned by Napoleon, and the Papal States were repeatedly abolished and partially restored after the Congress of Vienna in 1815. The final collapse came in 1870 during the Italian Risorgimento. Italian troops breached the walls at Porta Pia on September 20th and annexed the Papal States. Pope Pius IX refused to accept the new reality, declared himself the prisoner of the Vatican, excommunicated the Italian leaders, and remained inside the walls. For nearly 60 years, successive popes lived in self-imposed isolation. The deadlock was finally broken in one of the most surprising diplomatic moments of the 20th century. On February 11, 1929, Pope Pius XI and Benito Mussolini signed the Lateran Treaty. Vatican City was officially born as a fully independent sovereign state, the smallest in the world. Italy recognized its sovereignty, paid substantial financial compensation for the lost territories, and the Roman question was finally solved. The tiny state received its own yellow and white flag, with the crossed keys and papal tiara, passports, euro coins bearing the Pope's image, post office, Radio Vaticana, newspaper L'Osservatore Romano, and complete independence. The Pope became an absolute elected monarch. The legendary Pontifical Swiss Guard, founded in 1506 by Julius II, continues to protect the Pope to this day. These elite soldiers must be Swiss Catholic males, unmarried, between 19 and 30 years old, at least 174 centimeters tall, and have completed Swiss military training. Their colorful Renaissance uniforms, legendarily designed by Michelangelo, hide serious modern training and a sacred oath to defend the Pope, even at the cost of their own lives. The 20th and 21st centuries brought new challenges and transformations. Pope Pius XII navigated the horrors of World War II, with intense historical debate still surrounding his public silence versus private efforts to save Jews. Pope John XXIII shocked the world by calling the Second Vatican Council in 1962, which modernized the Church by introducing Mass in local languages, promoting ecumenism, and opening dialogue with the modern world. Paul VI implemented the reforms and became a traveling pope. John Paul I, the Smiling Pope, reigned only 33 days in 1978. John Paul II, the first Polish pope, became a global icon who helped bring down communism, survived an assassination attempt in St. Peter's Square in 1981, and visited 129 countries. Benedict XVI, a brilliant theologian, made the historic decision to resign in 2013, the first pope to do so in nearly 600 years. Pope Francis, the first Jesuit and Latin American pontiff, emphasized mercy, care for the poor, migrants, and the environment. Today, stepping into the Vatican feels like entering a living time machine. The Vatican museums stretch for kilometers and house one of the greatest art collections on Earth, with over 70,000 works on display, including the Laocoon, Apollo Belvedere, Raphael rooms, and the Sistine Chapel, where new popes are still elected under Michelangelo's ceiling. Beneath the basilica lies the ancient Vatican necropolis, excavated in the 1940s, where archaeologists discovered what many believe are the actual bones of St. Peter, marked by ancient graffiti reading Petros Eni, Peter is here. The apostolic archives contain millions of documents spanning 12 centuries of human history. Vatican City functions as a complete modern micronation, with its own bank, pharmacy, supermarket for residents, fire brigade, heliport, tiny railway, and even a football team. It maintains diplomatic relations with almost every country and holds permanent observer status at the United Nations. Of course, no institution spanning 2,000 years is without shadows. There have been periods of corruption, the controversial Crusades, the Inquisition, the Galileo affair, financial scandals involving the Vatican Bank, the painful clerical abuse crisis, and VatiLeaks. Wild conspiracy theories claim the secret archives hide everything from suppressed gospels to ancient technology. But the real story of saints and sinners, faith and human weakness, resilience and redemption is infinitely more powerful. From a humble fisherman's secret grave in a malaria-ridden swamp to the smallest sovereign state on earth that still commands the attention of billions, the Vatican has survived the fall of the Roman Empire, barbarian invasions, schisms, reformations, revolutions, Napoleon, 2 world wars, and countless internal crises, it remains a place where faith, art, power, and mystery intertwine like nowhere else. Millions of pilgrims visit every year, standing in the same square where popes have blessed the world from the balcony for centuries, feeling the immense weight of history and the enduring pull of something greater than themselves. This tiny golden enclave, completely surrounded by Rome yet fully independent, continues to inspire awe, debate, faith, controversy, and wonder. Its story is still being written with every new pope, every diplomatic effort, every visitor who steps through its doors, past and present, drawing us into its ongoing, living narrative. Every pilgrim who kneels in prayer, and every visitor who gazes up in silent amazement at Michelangelo's masterpieces. From blood-soaked arenas and hidden tombs to breathtaking domes and global spiritual influence, the Vatican stands as living proof that sometimes the smallest places on earth hold the greatest power, and that faith, resilience, and human ambition can truly move mountains across 2,000 extraordinary years.